Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Today I want to show you a video describing the evil, dark side of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon church cult. Much of this you probably have never heard. Let's get into it.
Joseph Smith went to his close circle of his 12 apostles and did kind of an Abrahamic test, you could say, and said, I need all of you to give me your wives. And Helen's dad was like, no thanks. This is hard, but I'll do it. And then he's like, it was a test. I actually want your daughter instead. He's like, great, you can have my daughter. Don't take my wife. So yes, he married 14-year-old Helen Mar Kimball. It's probably one of the most famous, controversial marriages, and that he promised her family exaltation in return. Lucy Walker, after Lucy Walker's mother died, Joseph took her and her siblings into his home, and then he proposed to Lucy when she was 16 years old. Remember, he's revered as a prophet to her, and he has no problem with changing a foster father relationship into one of a husband and wife. So he was saying that it was a commandment from God, and then Lucy was given 24 hours to decide. And he says, if you don't come back and decide, then the gates of heaven will be closed against you forever.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss living high-demand religions or organizations and find healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you'd like to see our faces, head on over to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can like, subscribe, become an advocate for people coming on and sharing their stories. Although today we are doing something a little different. We're not sharing a personal story. We are sharing, the personal story of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS, also known as Mormon, although they don't like to be called that anymore. So, we're going to be using them interchangeably, I'm sure. So today's guest, she's been on a few times. She's an OG in the ex-Mormon content creator space. She's amazing. She's hilarious. You all love her. We all love her too. Thanks for joining us, Kara Burrell / Nuance Ho.
Thanks for having me. Hey, Cults to Consciousness. Good to be back. Love you so much.
We love you so much. I'm bummed that you picked the exact same days to go on your vacation with your fun friends and fans as our Costa Rica trip, or else I totally would have gone with you. So everyone, if you don't want to go to Costa Rica, go to Greece with Kara. She's just going to have all the fun in the sun. You're going on a boat. It's going to be a good time. We're going to talk about more details at the end of this, but I just wanted to throw it out there because I love you and I wish I could come.
I love you and I wish I could come to Costa Rica. And when I found out that wasn't an option and I could just do my own trip, that's what I'm doing. 7 days in Greece instead. But our trips are around the same time. So we're both, just girls out there doing awesome trips in the world. So you're an inspiration. Your channel's doing so amazing. Oh, I love you to death. And I'm just following in your footsteps. You're doing a trip. I thought I'd do one too.
Yeah, we're doing all the things, but we're not doing all the cult leader things. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Cult leaders, specifically Joseph Smith. Now, some of you might be going, is he really a cult leader? We're going to kind of decide that today. We're going to talk about his beginnings, his little business ventures, the way that he started the religion, the Book of Mormon, everything. Kara's the one bringing all the facts. I was like, if we're going to do a Mormon history hoedown, I obviously need the Mormon history hoedown Nuance Ho to come in and give us all the receipts because she knows all the resources. I have learned a lot from you, Kara, and that's where...
I'm not perfect, though. I will always make a mistake somewhere.
Well, we do our best. But most of the time when I'm talking about Mormon history, I'm either quoting one of Kara's videos or one of John DeLynne's videos. They're very well researched, and so you guys can just trust us on this or fact check us, whatever you want to do. So we're talking about Joseph Smith, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS. Where do you want to start, Kara?
Let's start with first explaining that the distinctions between LDS, for people who don't realize, I want to discuss how Joseph Smith is, yes, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that you and I grew up in what might be called like the Brighamite branch. You're familiar with that term, right?
Yeah.
People revere Joseph Smith as this prophet of God, and our scriptures, the kind that I grew up, revere him so close to Jesus Christ that there's quotes that like Joseph Smith, the prophet, seer, and revelator, has done more, save only Jesus Christ for the salvation of men in this world than any other man that has ever lived in it. Did you grow up with that kind of rhetoric around Joseph Smith?
Yeah.
Anyone who's not familiar with how much Joseph Smith already from our youth is placed on a pedestal. And so Joseph Smith, though, he was part of a bigger Christian revival movement in the baby United States in the early 1800s. And then after his death, there were countless break-off sects of Mormonism that formed, and the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like I said, the Brighamite branch, that is one of them. But like Lindsay Hansen Park, who's a like historian, researcher, podcaster, Lindsay Hansen Park, who runs Sunstone, she said at one time, I couldn't believe the number. She said it was like 2,400 break-off sects of Mormonism exist today. I would need to fact check that, but she is involved in those communities. But, you know, any family who says, I've got a revelation, what Joseph Smith started is now corrupt. I have the new prophetic revelation. That's a big topic right now with so much Mormon true crime. Joseph Smith did start a type of religion that this is a restoration. And so there are an outrageous amount of people who say, I'm the next prophet. I'm the next prophet. Okay. You know? And so there's many different break-off sects of what he started. And so you've talked to so many people on your program already, I'm sure. And I'm sure you're going to be talking to many more people from those break-off sects like FLDS, different polygamous sects in the future, like the Kingston clan, stuff like that. Yeah. I would have to say that I like our version of Mormonism the best. At least it has the least amount of polygamy. There's
it's the
still
most diluted version.
Yeah. And so all of this, though, is that there is somebody, a prophet, calling back the idea of prophets that are going to be paving the way for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then obviously he's criticized, Joseph Smith, that it was not just a regular preacher preaching from the Bible. Joseph Smith started an entire religious movement of Mormonism. And so while the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is run by President Nelson, like a 99-year-old man in Salt Lake City, Utah, with his other 90-year-old apostles, and it's a very corporatized church, there are lots of different ones. And President Nelson was the one who said, don't say the word Mormon, don't even touch it. I want you guys to say the original name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But Mormonism is, it's a pretty broad term that encompasses the movement of what Joseph Smith's revelations came forward. And then, so if people who are LDS watching this, they need to kind of separate themselves, honestly, from what the church is, what it is to you today, how you live it, and understand that there are oceans of trauma. I never want people to miss that the ways in which following prophets of the LDS Church and then following people who also claim to be prophets who are just following in the footsteps of Joseph Smith, like Warren Jeffs, they're really not that different. There's hardly anything that Warren Jeffs has done that Joseph Smith didn't do many times over. Yeah. And that is my problem, and that is where my criticism comes from. Because even if you enjoy the modern church and what it benefits, you have to look at the fruits of what Joseph Smith started, and it should tell you a lot. It should tell you a lot about him and the God that you would supposedly worship.
And that's why I wanted to do this episode, because we talk about Mormonism and a lot of people say, well, it's not a cult. And I think that, yeah, you could go back and forth on the mainstream Mormon church as far as, is it a cult? We're not going to do that today because that'll take forever. But when you look at the origins and you look at the founding and you look at everything surrounding the founder, it's pretty damning evidence that maybe this isn't what you want to follow. And that's not to say, just like you said, Kara, that the Mormon church now, the modern day church, isn't doing good things, isn't a positive experience for some people, because for some it is. But we are going to be talking about the origins and how that can get twisted real fast and how people can use those revelations to do bad things. So where do we start with Joseph's life?
Yeah, so starting with his early life, this is going to come into play because I'm going to explain a lot of the manipulations and fraud, and when that's kind of just already baked into the entire deal. So starting with Joseph Smith's early life, he was born in 1805 in Sharon, Vermont, and Joseph was the fifth of 11 children in a family that struggled horrendously with all kinds of poverty, and the land was really bad. It was hard to grow crops. Very unstable, possibly alcoholic fathers, what some also records show. So his father, Joseph Smith Sr., was a farmer and also an occasional treasure digger. And then his mother, Lucy Mack Smith, was in and of herself a deeply religious woman, and she was constantly trying to instill like good Christian values and a sense of purpose into her children. And it's a long, fascinating story about his parents and how they tie into things. But what you really need to know is that Joseph Smith's life changed dramatically a few times in his youth. His family's farm was failing, and so he started to make money for the family by using this folk magic technique where he would put a stone in a hat, which I can actually demonstrate for you because I am an ex-Mormon podcaster. And who am I if I don't have the hat right here? So he'd make money for his family by putting a stone into a hat and saying to farmers that he could see that there was buried treasure underground on their land. Like, oh, hey, there's a silver mine down there. Pay me some money and I'll lead you to it. Oops, I didn't. They'd kill a dog or do different occult ceremonies. And if I didn't do the ceremony right, didn't say the prayer right, the treasure would slip deeper into the earth. It's called slippery treasure.
And the guardian would pull it further, right? You would have to appease the guardian of the treasure, like the spirit.
Yeah.
Guardian.
No one was like, maybe there just wasn't any treasure there. So from doing that practice, he could just say, oops, and the farmers would still pay him money. And this eventually led to, I'm going to get into it as we talk, but this practice of scrying or glass looking, treasure digging, it was illegal. It was extremely disreputable. It was, and by disreputable, I mean like white trash. It was the thing that you don't want to get mixed up with those crazy Smith boys doing that stuff. The rock that he was doing it from was from a witch, his friend named Sally Chase. So he believed in the occult practices. He has family members who were part of the Salem witch trials. So things to do with the occult and really believing in the spiritual realm, where it was definitely like actually realistic for Joseph Smith as he was growing up. And so he was eventually found guilty in a trial for this illegal action. And then a lot of that laid the groundwork for much of the establishment of the church, right? Mm-hmm. So as Mormonism was getting off the ground, Joseph Smith later claimed to have received golden plates from an angel / Native American spirit named Moroni, which he translated into the Book of Mormon, using that same rock in the hat that I just showed you, that he was looking for buried treasure where he never found anything. And Joseph said that the Book of Mormon is the most correct book on earth and that people would come closer to God by reading it than by any other book. Mm-hmm. So a lot of claims to authority here. A lot of claims to where you find your salvation and who you get it through. I did a podcast a couple days ago with John DeLynn, and we talked about the top 10 reasons that Mormonism is false to us. I did 5 and John did 5. Go check it out. It's a popular video. And one thing that he said that had never really occurred to me before, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is although Mormonism would say that like the Book of Mormon is the keystone of the religion, that's something that you grew up hearing as well.
Oh yeah, like they would even draw the arch and be
exactly.
like this, and then it was like the Bible, and then I don't remember what the other one is, but the keystone is the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and like if you remove that out of an arch, everything comes crashing down.
Yeah.
And John pointed out such an amazing fact that I just want to repeat here for your audience and any one person who's Mormon who might want to listen to me, listen if you have to, that truly for the church overall, the Book of Mormon is not the keystone. It's what they say is the keystone of the religion, that you need to grow a testimony of it, and then everything else will fall into place. You need to subdue your critical thinking and have a testimony of Joseph Smith no matter what. That is what the keystone of the religion is have a testimony of Joseph Smith no matter what you learn, because the Book of Mormon is a perfect example of you can imbue anything you want out of the texts, you know? you can have a spiritual experience by reading this book and then say, if this is true, then everything else in Mormonism is true, right? That's how a lot of people work their testimonies. It's a lot harder to be like, I know for sure that Joseph Smith translated this book with a rock and a hat, because that's exactly how God translates things, or it's like, I totally believe that Joseph Smith wrote D&C because that's what God told him to do, and destroy his wife Emma if she didn't allow polygamy. It's one of the Book of Mormon is one of the few things where the church is different than other Christian churches, because it's something that Joseph Smith was able to produce, that people are able to say, how did he do it? He couldn't have done it. He's not a con man. He's a simple farm boy.
Yeah.
It's too complicated to see how he did all of these things. But because of the wishy-washiness of spiritual testimony and manipulation, the Book of Mormon is the keystone in one of the worst ways. But as I keep talking, and I want to just point out to listeners that the Book of Mormon is in and of itself kind of a ruse. When missionaries would be talking to someone, it's Joseph Smith that you really have to have a testimony of. And you can't have a testimony of this man for all the reasons I'm going to get into. You have to have a testimony of something you can imbue meaning of, like scriptures that you can take something out of.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because the second that I lost my testimony of Joseph Smith was the second that I was like, oh, it's all made up. Because I remember finding the multiple versions of the first vision and learning about the polygamy, and in a way that was never taught before, like the actual version of polygamy that happened. And the Book of Abraham, when I learned that that was false and completely made up, I was like, oh, this guy just made it up. Got it. And then I was out.
Yeah. Similar to a lot of us, like you are told your whole life that he was just too simple of a boy to make it up. But what apologists for the church want to do is they always want you to focus on one aspect. And if you can make allowances, is what apologists call it, if you can only make allowances and give some breathing room to this and say, there is a chance that A plus B equals X, there's a chance one way or another you could get there. I don't know the formula.
Yeah.
It's like, no, Occam's razor every time. What is the most likely scenario? And not just this puzzle piece, but this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And that's what's great about talking to you. Cults to Consciousness.
Hey.
Because it's a pattern that your listeners will be super familiar with.
Yeah.
Of how cult leaders cult, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go into polygamy, but this is obviously an extremely long, thorough subject. I mentioned Lindsay Hansen Park, who's done Year of Polygamy podcast. If people want to know more about this aspect of polygamy, I'd recommend going over, listening to some of that podcast, or In Sacred Loneliness is a fantastic book as well. So one of the most controversial aspects of Joseph Smith's life was obviously the practice of polygamy that he introduced. A lot of Mormons, even today, do not know that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, which is insane. I don't know how familiar I was with it. A lot of people think it started with Brigham Young, because I think the church does not want people to know about Joseph Smith's polygamy and the degree to which he practiced it, because it has got scary, manipulative sex cult written all over it.
Yes.
So Joseph Smith, he started to secretly marry the records show about between 30 and 40 women while in Nauvoo, Illinois, where the church was hunkering down for a while, between 30 and 40 women. And not just a few of these secret marriages, he also deceived the entire public generally. He deceived his entire church, lying, saying, why are you guys saying that I practice polygamy? I have more than one wife when I can only see one, And so many denials about what he was doing. It was really, at the beginning at least, a more quiet, insular club of spiritual wifery. He was lying to his wife, Emma, and Emma remained completely unaware of most of these marriages until after Joseph Smith had already married over 20 women.
Right. So a couple years, right?
Yeah, several years. So what's crazy though is, I don't know what this is called in terms of like psycho behavior, but when you make a declaration that other people have to follow something, but you never have to follow it, Joseph Smith did that a lot. Quick story about like the word of wisdom. It's supposed to be a word of wisdom, but also he was saying like, no righteous priesthood holder can be in my church if he doesn't obey it. So is it a word of wisdom that you don't have to obey, or do you have to obey it? No strong drink, Joseph Smith was still drinking. He was still smoking cigars, still engaging in smoking tobacco. He was drinking wine the night before he was killed. So Joseph Smith does a lot of rules for you, but not for me kind of stuff, right?
The whole do what I say, but not as I do.
Yeah. I'd love to understand more of where he gets off, like the audacity. But so in LDS doctrine, it's just so crazy to me thinking back to like seminary and the things that I was taught as a kid and reading stuff, knowing none of the context. So like an entire year of my high school, I spent once a day going to seminary, reading D&C, reading the Doctrine and Covenants. I have the scriptures right behind me, never knowing what any of the context around the revelations with polygamy and Doctrine and Covenants, section 32. Section 132. Mm-hmm. So the first wife, according to Joseph Smith's revelations, was supposed to approve of any additional wives.
Right.
And this is known as the Law of Sarah. But Joseph ignored this rule, like I said, marrying just numerous women, up to 20, without ever consenting with his wife's knowledge. The Book of Mormon specifically says polygamy, bad, don't do it, abomination, no thanks. And then Joseph's like, actually reading you loud and clear, yes, polygamy. So the Book of Mormon specifically says no polygamy, that's an abomination. D&C says do it, but consent with your wife first and make sure that it's for like the raising up of seed. And Joseph Smith did not have any children that we know of that can be traced with DNA with actually raising up a seed. It had a lot to do with not just control of himself or control of women, but controlling a lot of the situations there in Nauvoo at the time. So between what I just said, he's making a lot of declarations that are very convenient for other people to do, but he's allowed to escape. So Emma and him had many different fights over this, and especially when she discovered that Joseph Smith was having sex with their teenage adopted
nanny.
Servant girl that was living with them. 16-year-old Fanny Alger in the barn. And for his right-hand man, Oliver Cowdery, bringing that to people's attention was excommunicated for that. Okay. So at every single turn, Joseph Smith is not obeying any of the rules, and sometimes even going as far as engaging in what you would call like statutory rape. So if we're talking about a restoration of God's one true church, they want to say, church members want to be like, give brother Joseph a break. All right. For now, don't criticize the guy. I can't worship a God when he says, I have been waiting to restore my church, and the one person I need is a treasure digger. And I need somebody who, when I introduce this higher law of marriage, I need him to,
sneak around,
rape a non-consenting 16-year-old. Like that's the pattern. I don't care how imperfect you think your prophets are. That's not the God choosing him. Not my favorite God then. I'll be in hell, that's who God is, right? So
real quick to clarify for those who aren't familiar. So the main part of the Book of Mormon is supposed to be a history of people who lived in the Americas, who sailed from, they called them the Israelites, came over, supposed to be Native Americans that we discovered because God cursed them by turning their skin brown. It's a whole story, but I just want to clarify, the Book of Mormon is supposed to be that, like an actual history. That's how they presented it to us when we were growing up. The Doctrine and Covenants is this collection of revelation that Joseph was like, oh, I was talking to God and he told me A, B, and C. And so it's supposed to be actual revelations that we're supposed to follow, which is why we're talking about D&C 132, which is when he said, God told me I have to practice polygamy. And is it also in 132 where it says, Emma, if you don't listen and you don't let Joseph do this, an angel with a flaming sword will come and smite you? Is that also 132?
Sort of. You're combining two different stories, but close enough. Yes.
Which story?
There's destruction for people who don't let me do what I want to do. But basically, yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that so people know that he is making up these revelations as it's convenient, and not to confuse that with the main chunk of the Book of Mormon, which is the quote history of the people in the Americas.
Which is its own convenient thing, because they're like, it's really more convenient to be racist for them. It's not convenient to like think of Native Americans as equal with white settlers. That really puts some problems on their slavery. So, and their subjugation of those people. So yeah, a lot of controversy around if these were just like spiritual marriages. Are these just sealings just for time? What is this all about? There's so many pathetic apologetics on this, and people just, I don't fault them for not wanting to know or looking things in the face or knowing, but Joseph's wives themselves, they provided sworn affidavits indicating that they were married to Joseph in very deed, which means in old-timey language that they had sexual relations with him. Okay, there's a lot more I can say about that, but Joseph had sex with these wives, and the LDS Church, it has these things called the Gospel Topics essays now, and that now acknowledges from the church, from the top down, that Joseph had between 30 and 40 wives and did sleep with, at least a couple dozen of them. But right. So, and then Joseph's practice of polyandry can't go swept under the rug, which meant that he was marrying women who were already married to other men, which contradicts everything else, like good, faithful men in the church, who those women would have had every right to be sealed to in the afterlife to their husbands. But instead he was marrying women who were already married to other men. And there are estimates that, this is again from the official church, that he was married to between 12 and 14 of these polyandrous marriages of women who they were already spoken for, and sending some of them on missions. So
yeah,
a lot of the times, most of the times without the husband's knowledge. So yeah, these women were typically married to faithful members of the church and just unaware of what Joseph's actions were. And I can get into some of those stories in a sec.
I want to offer you a book I wrote called Understanding Christian Apologetics, a Comprehensive Guide. Why do I expose false teachers, false prophets, and heretics on my YouTube channel? Am I a gossip? Am I a slanderer? Do I bring division to the body of Christ? Why do I do this? This book, Understanding Christian Apologetics, goes into a deep, thorough analysis of why I do what I do. What is the ministry of discernment, understanding Christian apologetics? This is an ebook. It's free of charge, no cost to you. Order your copy today. Now let's get back into the program. Many of you have asked me the question, where can I get a good book on Christian Bible doctrine? I've compiled this one on the fundamental beliefs of Christianity from an Arminian perspective, since I am an Arminian minister, meaning that I'm not Calvinist. I believe in the Arminian doctrine that man does have a free will. So I cover all of those doctrines, every major doctrine in Christianity in this book. It's well over 300 pages long. Get your copy today. It's free. I'm not charging a dime for it. My email is pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. Order your copy today. Let's get back into the program.
This is really important because when I was growing up, tell me if you heard the same story, it was, oh guys, the reason for polygamy, don't even worry about it. It's not even nefarious. Check this out. All these guys went and died in a war. I don't even know which war they were referencing. I don't know if a war existed, but this is what I remember learning as a kid. A whole bunch of guys died, and it just left these women just poor and alone, and they needed a man. And so the men just married a whole bunch of women. And so it was really just to help the women out. And then you hear about Joseph Smith marrying women who were already married. You hear about Joseph Smith marrying young girls who were perfectly fine in their parents' homes. And none of that adds up at all. And also, one of our guests pointed out, I think it was King Benjamin, he was like, newsflash, you don't have to marry someone to take care of them. You can still help them without marrying them. So I thought that was a funny commentary too.
Yeah, and especially for a church that is really big on agency. The whole war in heaven was allegedly fought over Satan wants to take away your power to choose, and Jesus Christ wants you to have agency, free will
Right.
to do what you wish. And women, sorry guys, you actually have to be married. Doesn't matter if you like the guy, doesn't matter anything. You can be a 20th wife, but at least you're a wife. And that's the only way you get into Mormon heaven. It's called the new and everlasting highest order, best part of heaven. You're gonna love it. And then it's as soon as they have too much resistance from the U.S. government, never mind, it's not so special anymore. And you can just get into heaven with any old regular marriage, you know?
Yeah.
So, the way that women are just subjugated and talked about, they're called like jewels on the crown of these prophets, of these men. Like,
Ew.
I'm no equal standing. Yeah, you're just a jewel. You're an ornament on the crown of this person who is ordained to be a god in the future life. And you are one of the jewels on his crown. So that's fun.
Yeah. And before we move on from polygamy, I want to have us talk about the manipulation and coercion as a cult leader may do, like Keith Raniere, getting other women to convince women to marry him. He's not even doing it himself. He's enlisting other people who these girls trust, to convince them to marry him, or using very coercive, flowery letters to these women. And we know, because one of them's the happiness letter, which the church
just
still
about to go
uses.
there. You read my mind.
Why does the church still use? Anyway, let's talk about what it is, and then
because they think we're dumb.
Well,
they think we're dumb.
We weren't dumb. We were tricked.
Where you look for good fruits in Mormonism, you will find them. And where you look for truth, if you want the truth, you will find a very sad reality of what is true. But if you don't want the truth and you just want to look at the happy fruits, you can have blinders on. And that's what I did for a long time. I didn't leave the church till I was like 30. So you left much younger. Good for you. That's why you have more subscribers than me. I'm just catching up. Just kidding.
Kara.
Go on my Greece trip. Help me. I was Mormon until I was 30. Feel bad. No. But yeah, you were going in the exact direction that I wanted to go. I was exactly going to go to the happiness letter next, but you also reminded me of another thing that cult leaders also do, which is use other women to recruit sex partners for the cult leader. And a little known fact is some people, apologists for the church, they want to point to that. Well, Joseph Smith, he didn't just have just like 14-year-old wives. He also had like 50-year-old wives sometimes. Like, well, if he was just in it because he's a horn dog, why does he have older wives? And one thing that we can tell from the records of Joseph Smith's life and the marriages of these women is a lot of times, like you said, older women would coerce the younger women, people that they could trust, into these types of marriages. So these young women who are young and impressionable and told that their family's eternal salvation is on the line, and who are the prophet of the church, the person they already revere as the prophet, is telling them this. And then people around them in their inner circle are also telling them, like, whether my salvation depends on it or yours or your family's, they're in a closed loop of feedback. Very difficult to make autonomous decisions in. But the church loves free agency. It loves it, loves it, loves it.
So talk to us about the happiness letter.
So yeah, it's a very, very notorious example called, the happiness letter. And it's written to a young girl named Nancy Rigdon. And in this letter, Joseph suggested that what might seem wrong in one context could be right in another, which was his way of justifying polygamy as something that was divinely commanded. And like you mentioned, they still use this language in general conference talks all the time. You'll hear them get up over and over again, starting talks with, happiness is the object of our existence. It's why we're here. And when you talk about, okay, happiness is what again? Happiness is the object of our existence and why God sent us here. And that was used to convince a young woman to have sex with Joseph Smith, because it makes him happy. Context is key, is it not? Right? So between, getting into these marriages and promising just spiritual blessings or threatening with eternal consequences, the angel with the drawn sword story that you brought up, which is extremely disturbing when you think of all of the acts of horrible things that have gone on in the world. I am waiting for Elohim, for Mormon God, just once to intervene, to stop like child sex abuse, to stop anything. But the one time God was like, send down the angel with the flaming sword. I have got to intervene. This whole entire plan of mine, it's not like the Holocaust or anything. It's a teenager wouldn't marry Joseph Smith. And Joseph's like, I don't want to do this. There's an angel with a flaming sword threatening me. Mm-hmm. So to get him off my back, how about a BJ? Like, it's disgusting. Like, that's...
Yeah, honestly, when you put it in that context, when you think... Because growing up, I remember thinking that, like, well, he was threatened or the angel commanded it. But not once did I think, wait, this angel could have helped to end slavery sooner. This angel could have prevented a lot of things. But this is what the angel chose to do. It's just so interesting when you really sit down and think about it.
Mm-hmm. Again, like, people can worship whatever they are drawn to, but we got to talk about what that God prioritizes. And that's one of them. Polygamy, for something that was also not going to stick around and has so many oceans of trauma today. I honestly think it makes me cry. Sometimes I get angry and furious the ways that just regular Mormons themselves, I've done response videos to people before where they're talking about, like, was Joseph Smith perfect? No, but I know that he did everything in his power to give us precious truth. And like, you guys just want to like harp on how Joseph is done these small irrelevant, he's a man, God has only imperfect people to work with. You know, it's like, no, if you could quantify all of the pain and suffering from the children, the men, the women, just polygamy alone, of what Joseph started and put into practice, if you could quantify it, it would fill like tears of oceans. You know what I mean? Like, It is one of the most devastating parts of the settling of the American West and these polygamist marriages to children and neglect and everything I'm sure that you've covered in so much detail on your podcast. That's Joseph Smith. Like, that is not like, everybody makes mistakes thing. Like, no, this was instituted by somebody who was supposed to be a prophet, seer, and revelator, who apparently didn't have the foresight of what his successors would be doing. Mm-hmm. That makes Mormonism fall on its face. And you are being so disrespectful of calling things like mistakes. Joseph made mistakes. Give him a break. Like, if you say that, you have way more leniency for a fudging con man than you do for like the actual people who deserve your grace, your empathy, your care, and your understanding, because people don't want to look into the FALDS stuff. Mormons, they cringe. They don't want to look at the fruits. I'm going to get into this later, but like, they don't want to look at what the fruits are of what Joseph Smith created, right? But you have to. This is what he was. And we see it today. We see it in documentaries. We see it in true crime, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like out of all the people who get angry in the comments, it's usually the believing Mormons who are the most upset, because on all of our FLDS or fundamentalist videos, they're like, this is so misleading. This is so wrong. I can't believe you're doing this just for views by calling it Mormon. This is not Mormonism. And I'm like, but it is though. It is Mormonism because it's the original brand of Mormonism, not the diluted one that you practice, which is probably great according to you. But you cannot discount these people's experiences as not being Mormon because they're following it better than you are.
Right on, honestly. And again, like, everything that Joseph Smith said between like, if polygamy is ever taken away from the earth, you'll know that the church is in apostasy. So yeah, that is what they're going to take him at their word. And anytime there are fundamentalist factions of a church and then more like liberal or reform factions, the fundamentalists are called fundamentalists because they're going by the fundamentals of their religion. They're going by what the originator of the ideas had to say about it. And the only reason that there are so many rights that women and anything that has been reformed within the church, that anyone would say like, hey, that's not my church. The only reason is because of people like you and me and dissenters and people who speak up and actually shine a light on these things. So any Mormon who's like, I hate that you're talking about it that way, I'm like, every time through history, there has been a fundamentalist faction and dissenters. And guess which one you're in? You're actually in the dissenting faction right now. You're actually in the faction that is not the fundamentalist version. And you should be grateful for people who speak out and make Mormonism a healthier place to belong to. So if you think it's healthy, it's specifically healthier than anything Joseph would have imagined. if he came back today, he would not recognize this church. And every prophet after him too would be like, what are Black people doing in this church? You know, like, what are women doing giving prayers? Like, is that a queer person? Like sitting on the, with their family? Like what, from every different angle, Mormonism today is only moderately enjoyable by the people who have testimonies of it for dissenters, from what I just said. So it frustrates me. Be grateful for Shalise.
And Nuance Ho, doing God's work.
Yeah.
Is there more you wanted to say about polygamy?
So these a couple stories that I want to point out that are specifically heartbreaking that I could talk about endlessly, but I just want to make people aware of if they don't know the tactics and the angle in which Joseph Smith was taking. So yes, he married 14-year-old Helen Mar Kimball. It's probably one of the most famous controversial marriages, and that he promised her family exaltation in return. Exaltation in Mormon parlance, it means godhood, salvation, the highest form of godhood. She, as a 14-year-old, was expected to marry him, and that she was sealed to him, and it really effed up the rest of her life. But that's a whole story for another day. But Helen Mar Kimball, 14-year-old Joseph Smith, went to his close circle of his 12 apostles and did kind of an Abrahamic test, you could say, and said, I need all of you to give me your wives. And Helen's dad was like, no, thanks. This is hard, but I'll do it. And then he's like, it was a test. I actually want your daughter instead. He's like, great, you can have my daughter. Don't take my wife.
Oh, he was 37 at the time, late 30s.
I don't know his exact age, but yeah, right. Lucy Walker, after Lucy Walker's mother died, Joseph took her and her siblings into his home, and then he proposed to Lucy when she was 16 years old. Remember, he's revered as a prophet to her, and mother's dead. He's basically a foster father, and he has no problem with changing a foster father relationship into one of a husband and wife. So he was saying that it was a commandment from God, and then Lucy was given 24 hours to decide, and that all of this added pressure, she's not sleeping at all. And he says, if you don't come back and decide, then the gates of heaven will be closed against you forever.
Yikes. Spiritual manipulation at its best or worst.
Her diary about this is heart-wrenching. So Lucy Walker, again, her father was like sent on a mission just specifically. So I think that Joseph Smith could get his hands around this. And Zina Huntington Jacobs is another. Zina was already married to Henry Jacobs when Joseph proposed to her. And he was also claiming that an angel with a drawn sword commanded him to take her as a wife. And at the time, Zina was 7 months pregnant and super conflicted about it. And she eventually agreed to marry Joseph Smith and believed that she was saving Joseph's life by agreeing to do this. And quick side note, Ghost of Eternal Polygamy, one of the best books ever. Please, somebody read it. I have a video on it. Ghost of Eternal Polygamy is written by Carolyn Pearson, and it really goes into the doctrines of polygamy that still exist in Mormonism today and how temple sealings work. And so the reason I bring that up is because it is so heart-wrenching to think that Henry Jacobs, who was a faithful member of the church, there's no reason why the baby in Zina's stomach in Mormon theology, why that baby should not be Henry's in the afterlife. But the way that sealings work is that baby, forget about the DNA, that baby then was sealed to Joseph Smith. So that's something that he did repeatedly, was marry pregnant women. And apologists will say, well, he was marrying pregnant women. And back then, like, nobody had sex with pregnant women, and it's like, there's no evidence of that. People had different types of sex all the time.
Yeah.
Like, just because she was pregnant, that's not some slam dunk point that you think it is. And furthermore, it's horrible. Even if he's like, I'm only marrying pregnant women, so it doesn't look like I'm having sex with them, he's still sealing those babies to himself.
Yeah.
So he has all of this posterity in the afterlife. So it's pretty sick and twisted in my personal opinion. Mormons in the comments say, my prophet didn't do that, or whatever they want to say. So
yeah. How do we, for those who are going to be like, that's not true, what are the resources that we have for these stories?
There are affidavits. There are a lot of testimony, a lot of evidence of all of this, especially in books like In Sacred Loneliness. But this is all very thoroughly documented, and people will try to negotiate things around the edges, but look into anything like No Man Knows My History and In Sacred Loneliness. are the top two that come to mind in terms of books. But Year of Polygamy podcast, super well-researched podcast by Lindsay Hansen Park, I would recommend.
Okay.
So I could talk about polygamy for a long time. There are so many other stories like this of Joseph Smith marrying women behind Emma's back, doing like sham marriages. And then a lot of the things that have to do with the temples that Mormons are so well known for tie back to polygamy. And these type of very secret culty rituals that all kind of put this in a nice kind of package of Joseph Smith starting this new religion and needing like a secret, sacred blood oath to tie a lot of that stuff together. So I'll put a pin in polygamy for just a second. And I want to talk about just these general habits that Joseph Smith had with receiving revelations at remarkably convenient times. Mm-hmm. If people are familiar with the story of Martin Harris and have seen like the South Park episode, they go in heavily on that story about the translation process of the Book of Mormon. So when Joseph needed money to print the Book of Mormon, and Martin Harris's wife, she was skeptical. I think it was Lucy, and they're like, Lucy, smart. There you go. Yeah. Joseph conveniently had a revelation telling Martin that he absolutely, from God, sell your property and give me all of the money from your property so that I can print the Book of Mormon, or else eternal damnation from you. That's in the scriptures right behind me. That's D&C, like chapter 19, like telling somebody that that the only way that he can do it is threaten eternal damnation with somebody to print it, and then the story of the lost 116 pages, where after Martin Harris lost those 116 pages that his wife wanted to see for the Book of Mormon, then Joseph got a very convenient revelation saying not to retranslate them because evil people would alter the pages to prove that he was a fraud.
Yeah.
And that was a big sticking point when I was Mormon. I was like, if you're translating something, couldn't you just go back and translate it?
It was Lucy, right? Lucy is her name, where she was like, why don't you take these pages and see if he can retranslate? If we're going to give him all this money, like, let's make sure. And so they weren't really lost. I mean, they ended up being lost because we don't have them, but she took them to see if he could do it, and he basically couldn't. He didn't pass the test.
Cool. I don't know. Just anything at any point. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't just take these things in isolation. Look at all of the bigger ones. Have you ever heard in Mormonism that the waters are possessed by Satan?
Yes. That's why missionaries can't swim.
Ding, ding, ding. So you'll find that actually in D&C 61, chapter 61, like 14 through 15. Joseph Smith is like going on a journey and he's like, oh, those waters look a little bit too rough for me. And they're like, let's do it anyway. And he's like, I don't know. Actually, quick revelation. God said the waters are possessed by Satan. So we got to go by land. Just safer.
That's where that came from.
Very convenient, right?
Yeah, because then I was like, why do we still do baptism by water then? If it's possessed by Satan.
Just whatever Jesus did or didn't do, somewhere around the brand of Jesus, Joseph's like, tap into that. Revelations, yes. Be Christ-like, hit or miss. So obviously, and then like I said, with polygamy, with all of these rumors starting, very convenient revelations all the time around polygamy to justify it, to say that God's condemnation is going to kill his wife if she didn't comply. That's, again, D&C 132. One other thing that I want to make sure that people understand that's really funny is that Joseph Smith had a scribe, another right-hand man named William Clayton. And it's really key to understand how Joseph Smith was able to con so many people. And so Joseph Smith said that he knew this entire revelation by heart, and didn't need his stone in the hat, his Urim and Thummim, when he's like, all right, my wife, she's being kind of a bitch and won't let me marry my 22nd wife, so I need to come up with a revelation. William Clayton, go get a pen and paper, write this down. And so many different ways in which Joseph Smith, whether through like the Urim and Thummim or the Rock in the Hat or the Book of Abraham, wherever he needs to produce a revelation, it's always like he's able to do it by any means necessary. And if he needs to just memorize a revelation and just spit it out, he can do that too. So why I'm saying this is because I just think it is a really clear example that Joseph Smith can spit out these like biblical style languages easily at the drop of a hat, no pun intended, that he didn't, all of this stuff about like, how could Joseph have written the Book of Mormon? How could he have produced the text of the Book of Mormon? It's too complicated. It's got all this biblical style language in it. Not only is it completely anachronistic in so many different ways, don't get me started, but when he's producing revelations that he needs in a hot second because his wife is pissed, he's able to produce things like D&C 132 alongside his other revelations with language that is completely similar. You see where I'm going with this? Mm-hmm. And it's like Joseph Smith had a template for how to have divine speech that he could just whip out whenever he needed to. Again, so that completely falls on its face that like, he had to have been a prophet because he spoke like this when he had the rock that he got from his witch friend, Sally Chase, that he used to defraud farmers. That's the way we know he's a prophet. It's like when he was trying to produce revelations that were convenient at any given time with any given mechanism, with any given scribe, he was able to speak in this type of old-timey biblical language for whatever he needed to. So,
which also matched the language of the Bible that he had access to.
Hello, friends. I hope you're enjoying today's program. If you are, I would ask that you would, first of all, subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment on it, and share this on your social media platforms. It really does help the channel grow, and it helps me spread the word of truth. Thank you very much. I want to make you aware of an ebook that I have wrote, Von Hanshaw, Commentary on Cults. This is a book where I describe the characteristics of cults, cult leaders, the major cults that most of us are aware about, and dozens of cults that most of us have never heard of. And is your church a cult, or is it leaning toward becoming a cult? This is a book that you definitely need in your ebook library. It's free of charge. Order your copy today. My email address is pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. Order your copy today. Let's get back into the program.
Right. Like the specific mistranslations in the King James Bible, because obviously there's different translations. The ones that are in the Book of Mormon that are copied from not ancient texts, those are the same ones in the King James Bible, completely anachronistic to what the Book of Mormon claims to be.
Because the Book of Mormon is supposed to be much older.
Right. But apologists will be like, well, for that one section, God was like, your eyes are tired. Just go use your normal Bible. But anytime a religion keeps something from you, it's probably because they're not very proud of it. So there's like 1,000 things that people like you and me find out in our later years after we've dedicated half of our life and our money to it. It's like informed consent. Like tell people, let just the chips fall where they may. But there's just everything I'm saying is stuff that I would have never agreed to commit my life to. I would have known earlier, right? So
what were the names of some of the other texts, though, that he used to kind of rip off texts that he had access to? Do you remember the names of those?
He got some names from the Apocrypha, we think. And in terms of other names, a lot of people point to different towns and areas at the time, like Moroni and Cumorah and languages like that are found in different maps or different pirate like treasure books and things like that. There's a video that I did once with my best bud, Bill Reel, about Joseph's plagiarisms. Yeah. And we just go through every single thing of where Joseph Smith, he got that from that. He got that from that. The Tree of Life story that's in the Book of Mormon that is completely ripped off from a dream that his father had. It's extremely similar. So there's just about everything that Joseph got. You can point to something in his milieu and say that already existed, that already existed, that already existed. And it's a remix of him shuffling a lot of things, combining Christian mysticism, combining folk magic, combining a lot of the unanswered questions of the day in a convenient way to package it for people in a brand new American style religion, just like the only way American can, with the can-do attitude, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly what America does. Just pull from everyone else's culture and bundle it up and call it your own.
Right. So Joseph Smith, it's true American religion. American Zion, another great book I recommend highly. American Zion tells the story of the entire church start to finish by historian Benjamin Park. It's the best. It's the best ever. So American Zion. I mean, it's a true American religion start to finish, and very corporatized as the church that I grew up in is today. So next, let me just, adding to what I said before, the revelations that Joseph's getting at a very convenient time, and him trying to say this is from a divine authority, but it's really clear to see that he can pull out divine authority whenever he feels like it in the language that is most advantageous to con people around him, you know? Mm-hmm. So again, with the polygamy justifications, he's claiming that, in the Bible, God commanded, it's really clear if you look at the history of Joseph Smith, he was reading like the Old Testament when he was getting the commandment for polygamy. He's reading the accounts of like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, like I said, with the law of Sarah. And so he's like thinking, this is a restoration of all things. Then it's a restoration of all the things. It's like, are you going to bring back like blood sacrifice of animals? It's like, I want to bring back all things, but we'll start with the one where I get to have sex with your wife.
Well, he did sacrifice animals.
That was more of the folk magic thing. But I mean, like, if you're going to bring back a restoration of everything from the Old Testament,
sure.
He's not bringing back like no shellfish or something. He's not bringing back everything from the law of Moses,
Yeah.
He's mixing all kinds of cottons and fabrics. That freak. Anyway. So the LDS Church overall has just lied and had such problems with transparency on all of this. And so many people, me, you included, I feel like just a lifetime of betrayal with not knowing many of these things and having a deep, sincere wish to raise our families in this church. Like, I can handle a lot of things. I can handle a lot of problems with Joseph Smith, but I can't handle a church that won't be transparent about a lot of these things and are constantly, it's a really painful thing. The thing that if you want to speak to this as well, the thing that really gets me upset and gets me irritated truly is how much some of these things have been hidden, how many people have been just like excommunicated for speaking up over time. So on one hand, the church tries to hide them. And then on the other hand, you'll hear people constantly say, the church has never hidden anything. They've always said this. You can go to any back section of a library with the last book that the church didn't burn and read it for yourself. You're just a lazy learner, So the church, they want to have it both ways. They want to hide this history, and they also want to say that we're totally transparent. We've always told you that Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon with a rock and a hat, even though I thought South Park was lying. I thought South Park, when I saw that when I was 16, I said, why would they make that up? That's crazy.
Yes.
That's the weirdest lie. And now the church is like, yeah, we've always told you guys that. Oh, those paintings of Joseph Smith running his hands over. You're imagining that. What are you, Tim Ballard on ketamine? Like I'm getting angry and exhausted just throwing out other people I hate.
No, I said the same thing. My brothers were like, Shalice, you have to watch this because, they were like, Shalice, really, why do you believe in this stuff? I'm like, it's true, guys. Don't you want to go to the highest level of heaven?
Gee whiz, guys.
They're like, you have to watch this episode. And I was like, no, it's so dumb. So I watch it and I'm all like, whatever. And then I look at it, I'm like, none of this is true. This is so dumb. Why did you make me watch this? They were trying to tell me without telling me. Mm-hmm. But bless them. I couldn't see it because like you, I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would they make up something so dumb? Mm-hmm. And then I found out it was 100% accurate.
I want a time machine, and I get to play God once in the universe, and you get one special pet project. Elohim's was the flaming sword with this thing when he could have done other stuff. As God, I will do other good things and intervene with my time machine. But the one thing I want to do more than anything is I want to go back in time, whenever that was, like 2006, something like that, whenever that, I think it came out, 2003, I don't know. And I want to go show that to every Mormon I can get my hand with like an iPad that I bring from the future and be like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I want to collect 1 million Mormons all unanimously saying that's not how it was translated. No. That's a lie. I hunger after a record of that many Mormons minds being blown.
Yeah.
Because we just said that's not it. That's not, and so that's a perfect segue because I want to talk about the temple next.
Okay.
And the thing about the LDS temples is if I were to see what goes on in LDS temples, I would have said, like most of the teenagers in my comment section, when people show what goes on inside the temple, saying, that's not my church. Like, What are you showing me? That's not Mormonism. What is the chanting and the aprons and the robes?
The veils.
Mormonism is, Mormon temple ceremonies are so unrecognizable to the kind of Mormonism that converts sign up to, or that I was in when I was a teenager. So when people sometimes do bring hidden cameras into a temple and they put that online, from TikTok to YouTube, the number one thing you'll find from Mormons is saying, like, why would you lie like that? Similar to the South Park video, right? And that just goes to show that high control religious groups, they operate in a way where the high control, I made a video about this the other day, irritates me to no end, but sorry, I'm really moody today. I had a great day. I'm in a good mood, but you're just reminding me of all the things that I don't like. But we talk about cults, we talk about high demand religions, and high demand means for someone who thinks that the demand at its height is for their benefit. Is how I would put it.
Interesting.
I hope you think that I'm a genius, because I went 10,000 feet over the person I was responding to in my video last week. I'm not even going to tell you what qualifies or doesn't qualify as a high demand religion. I don't care. What I'm talking about is when people think it's very cool to be part of a high demand religion because I do hard things that other people in other religions couldn't do, because you guys just don't want to work hard. That's why the birth rates are declining. Like high demand. Jesus said, you have to do hard things. And if you don't love me more than your father and your mother, then you're not my disciple. That's what it means to be a high demand religion. What's the point of being in a low demand religion? What I just hope, I'm taking a break to talk about this irritating fact for me right now, because when things are hidden from us, like the rock and the hat, when things are hidden from us, like the temple ceremony, our whole life, you are told in a type of cliched, thought-stopping, culty way from the church, like I just said, that was a you problem. You didn't understand it. You're not spiritual enough. That the demand for your adherence always lies with you, where people like us, critics of these types of groups, the height of demand should be placed on the people making the unquestionable orders, which is what we would call the cult leaders. Use whatever term you want. The religious leaders need to have a higher amount of scrutiny, because once you say, I speak for God, I speak for Jesus, the talking is really over. And so if people are in a system where they love that it's high demand, because Jesus told me I should give so much of my life, I should snuff down my intellectual curiosity, I should ignore the cognitive dissonance, I should allow my church to have as much things hidden, and I will continually put that blame back on myself because I guess I didn't study enough. And you're just a lazy learner. And if I leave, I know it's going to be because I didn't study enough, or whatever. The demand is always put on the underdog, on the smaller person, when systems like this that have so much control over the thoughts and actions and behaviors of their members is the last thing that high control groups want to criticize. And that is what Cults to Consciousness is all about, right? Get some consciousness about who you are allowing to run your brain. Because when we live our entire lives being told the Book of Mormon is the most correct book ever, and it's translated one way, and we think it's a lie that South Park is telling us how it really happened, that's how I would say 100% of millennials were taught.
Yeah.
The truth was through a freaking parody, through a satire on our church. And it's not from our 10,000 hours at seminary or institute or Sunday school.
Exactly.
Or reading the scriptures. And all of us said, oh, okay. Well, if that's, it's a lie. Okay. If it's true, then I guess I didn't pay attention. I guess I was sleeping that day or something. It's never a demand to stand up to the leadership and say, what the F was that?
Yeah.
Because that's how these groups maintain control.
Well, the thing is, I feel like most of the time, though, I don't explicitly remember them saying, Joseph Smith translated by looking at the plates and by putting his hand on them and then speaking to a person. I don't remember that explicit lesson, but every single depiction that we have, every painting, every picture was that. It's like the card they would give you to frame, the thing you would bookmark in your Book of Mormon, like that
Precisely.
was the imagery. And so even if they were like, well, we never said he translated it that way, it's just like they just made us believe it without actually telling us that. And so it's the plausible deniability thing. Like, well, we didn't tell you that. I mean, we didn't lie. Why did you think that painting was accurate? Who said that painting was accurate? You know, it's that kind of stuff that makes you feel
Plausible
icky.
deniability.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from every different aspect of kind of the shock of what you think the church is versus like, oh, okay. The blame reversal is just part and parcel of this religion. And again, for a church that if you're a truth seeker, if you're like, I joined the church because I want to know the truth, but your church doesn't respect truth and it doesn't respect your personal relationship to God enough to tell you about the character of his prophets and the character of this God, you're better off finding truth on your own than going through these men. Just straight up. Now tell me if it's really going to be you and me forever. I thought I didn't have to make a joke in a while, so I just throw out Paula Abdul references. So speaking of my temple, American Idol, let's transition back to Mormon temples.
Yeah.
Really quickly, the thing about Mormon temples that tie Joseph Smith to being the cult leader that I believe that he is the extra special kind of VIP club that Mormon temples are. And I don't know about you, Shalise, but I'm always surprised at how much I have to explain to like never Mormons, the difference between chapels that everyone meets in and temples and LDS temples, right? Do you feel like that too? Where you're like, oh, so it's a whole other system. It's its own thing.
I always just say like the castle version, you can only get in with a card that is swipeable and will say, ding, you're righteous enough. But the regular boring looking ones on every single block, anyone can go to this.
Right. And to go back to my American Idol analogy, it's the difference between like anyone can audition for American Idol, but to get the ticket to Hollywood, you have to go through Simon, Randy, and Paula, which stand in place for your bishop, your stake president, and then maybe like your personal conscience. I don't know. And that's your card. And then you can go to the temple, right? So a lot of people standing in the way to say if you're righteous or not and answer a different set of questions to actually be able to go take out these special ordinances that are only available through the Mormon church. Every other religion, so sorry guys, you need to have our special ordinances for this religion that has maybe 16 million members on a good day. The rest of you 8 billion. You are missing out hardcore. These are the ordinances, the washings and anointings, the endowments. You need to wear the garments, just all of the aspects of Mormonism that make it just an extra special VIP club that tell you that's where your salvation lies. And there is a phrase within Mormonism that if you're worried if you're going to die and go to heaven or not, if you hold a temple recommend, you're pretty much guaranteed that you will go to heaven. So different than just, chapels and things. And so with the ways in which the temple was even introduced as a part of something that is separate from your meetings on Sunday, from your congregations, from your ward, Mormonism's ties with Freemasonry and the temple is something that I never personally knew. And when I went through the temple for the first time, was really shocked by. Again, so if you see a hidden camera of the temple, most people are saying this is unrecognizable because it has so many holdovers from Joseph Smith's time as a Freemason. So Joseph joined the Freemasons just, I think, 7 weeks prior to introducing the temple ceremony, 7 weeks, and then took all of these same types of these secret handshakes, these grips, different types of special clothing with different like notches in them in different places and different penalties, different oaths. And so the church, though, has 0 records at the time of this coming by divine revelation. And for a church that had amazing records, which is fascinating, I can prove Mormonism false in 75,000 different ways. And one of my favorite is the things that we have records of versus the things we don't have records of for a church that loves keeping records. So very convenient missing the revelations about the temple because Joseph's like, yeah, I just got it from the old Freemason lodge. Like, I just picked this up. So all these Masonic influences that have gone on for generations that I still did in the temple to this day, and tons of similarities. And so most of the temple ceremonies that people do, they do not for themselves. They go through once for themselves, and then they go through the dead. And it's obviously got a million different questions about why are we doing these ceremonies and why is this even important? But the thing that Joseph Smith was originally trying to do was it was about these secret ceremonies for his polygamous wives, right? So like you see the side of the freeway and there might be like a gigantic $1 million lit up temple that's like, oh, that's glorious. I love to see the temple. I want to go there someday. And it's really just reminiscent of one of the darkest periods of Mormonism's past of polygamy, with these rituals that are identical to them. And then not only that, the blood oaths that were instituted after Joseph Smith's death, that I've made videos before where I mention that, and Mormons, they'll just say to me, that's not true. That's just not. And it's like, why are you responding to me when you could spend time Googling it? Just like Google it. You can find out that these oaths included until 1990, pantomiming, disemboweling, and throat slitting. Mm-hmm. And they were only taken out because of so much pressure. But after Joseph Smith died, this church, which I'm going to get into, had such a violent streak to it that they were instituted because they needed a way to rally their membership, basically to say, okay, you're going through the temple ceremony. Let's add in a special oath that you will avenge the death of Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith. Can we make you promise to avenge the death against the United States of America? Is that okay? That's something they put into the temple until like I think 1921.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. People, that's another thing I'll mention online. People be like, why are you lying? I have a video where I'm like, looking through if you're looking through the old photographs of like your great grandparents, I don't know how many greats, but like I put enough greats so that I'm the nuance. So I'm not saying your grandparents, I'm saying your great grandparents, and realizing that like, oh, well, that's their wedding day. Oh, that's interesting. That's not as hard. They just made an oath to avenge the death of Joseph and Hiram and like pantomime slitting their throat for that. And like, you don't really have the same warm, fuzzy feelings knowing that like your great grandparents in their wedding dress on their wedding day, that's what they're doing in the temple, that like right before they get sealed for time and for all eternity. Does that make sense? Like that is how deeply insidious and violent Mormonism has been and is all the way to this day, because part of that temple ceremony is something that every Mormon is still doing in all these pretty buildings all around the world today.
It's the cup, right? The cup still exists, which is supposed to represent your bowels going into the cup.
I didn't pay attention. I had a bloody nose and I just remember being like, oh, that's convenient. Thanks. Sorry, that's a different story. People know if they follow my channel, the only time I was really traumatized in the temple was I had a bloody nose in the middle of it. And you can't leave. So I was covered in blood, shaking people's hands. So I was just referencing.
Oh my gosh.
Because you can't leave. That's another reason it's a cult. Like you start today, every single temple ceremony. If you sit down and they say, you guys are all here out of your own free will and choice, right? And everyone's like, I'm not going to say anything now. Of course. Yeah. Nobody stands up because they say, fine, stand up if you don't want to be here. Like the time in which to get the hell out of there was apparently not that time, but at no point during the temple ceremony can you just get up and leave and say, this is too culty. This is too weird. Wearing green aprons and shouting, oh God, hear the words of my mouth with like 100 other people. And, once you go through the ceremony for the first time, you commit your time, talents, and resources to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints forever. And if you ever break that covenant, you are, as the church would say, like a son or daughter of perdition. If you break that covenant in the temple this day, Satan has power over you. Satan is in a movie in the temple and he looks at you, this actor, but he's pretty convincing as Satan. He goes, if they don't live up to the covenants and oaths that they make in the temple in this day, they'll be in my power. Like that is the language that Mormons are getting when they're going through their most sacred ceremony and covenants in the world. It's not just like I think that it should be like, do you want a batch of chocolate chip cookies that I just made? Because they're so nice and warm. Oh, I'd love that. Thank you for offering. It's more of a, you can have this, but if you don't want it, and I baked it just especially for you, this is like an analogy that I'm coming up off the top of my head with like Jesus Christ dying for your sins, and how dare you not want my chocolate chip cookies? You guys following me? Mm-hmm. If you don't want it, if you don't eat the chocolate chip cookies, then you're never going to eat ever again. And I'm going to put you in a dungeon in my basement and torture you forever. And I'm allergic to chocolate. I hope you're allergic to nuts, because I put a lot of stuff in here, and you're going to choke it down because you love me so much. Eating my cookies isn't supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a high demand cookie eating experience. See how I tie things together? Do you guys like how my brain works?
Cookie eating. Oh my gosh.
Analogies make sense to me.
It makes sense.
I lost one person, but I've been very coherent up till now. Thank you very much.
I want to know, because you're the Mormon history hoedown, Nuance Ho, do you know of any other things, any weird rituals that were there in the beginning that aren't there now? I feel like people have mentioned them in the comments, and I haven't done all my fact checking, but I wanted to ask you, someone mentioned a bathtub being involved in place of the naked poncho touching.
I guarantee 1000% they got that from me, because I'm the only one spreading the news about that. It's my favorite Mormon history fact. Oh, there's a lot. The temples were a lot different. There were times in which people would get drunk and like get into fist fights in the temple. I love that idea. But there's actually a bathtub. And I don't know how they brought it out west, but it's in the basement of the Salt Lake Temple. Fun fact. It's like in a friggin' storage room. But I think it was the Kirtland Temple. I believe, I could be wrong, I believe it was the Kirtland Temple where they would do washings and anointings in a big bath of cinnamon whiskey. So get naked and dunk each other in that. Seems expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know if that could cure a UTI or cause one, but that was the thing they did. So that's one of my favorite fun facts. But yeah, there's more that I could think of. You know, fun rituals like marrying teenagers, just like a hoot. But so what means to what end was in store for Joseph Smith? Because keep in mind, like then and in Jesus's time and now, Joseph Smith believed that the second coming was right around the corner. Joseph Smith, a lot of people don't realize, he believed the second coming of Jesus Christ would be in his lifetime, which is completely contradictory to what the Church of Jesus Christ teaches today. It's like, oh, no. He restored it, and it was supposed to have like new prophets. You know, that was not the original plan. So a lot of the actions, I'm going to be talking, you know, at length for the next year, probably about Tim Ballard and Visions of Glory and Lori and Chad Daybell and so many doomsdayers in Mormonism right now. They believe so fundamentally to their doctrines of their church that the actions that they take will not have any consequences because they are foreordained, they are inspired, this is what they are supposed to be doing. And when the law catches up with them, or people don't like them, then that's not part of the plan. God was supposed to come before this. And it just is this cycle that keeps coming. We see it today. We saw it Joseph Smith's day as well. So what I think is interesting is that unlike other types of, like, you could say isolationist sects of different Christian break-off things like Mennonites or Shakers that tried to live peacefully, the Mormons themselves were extremely combative. And the narrative that I was taught growing up was that everyone just hated Joseph Smith and his new Bible, and they were out to tar and feather the guy and not understanding, hey, that's in the Joseph Smith movie in a really fancy building that we would, I don't know about you, but I went on young women trips to
I
the
talk
thing.
about that too. I talk about
What do you say?
The spiritual manipulation. I still remember, it's such a vivid memory watching the movie of Joseph Smith's life and getting choked up and crying as a teenager, being like, oh my gosh, this must mean he's a true prophet. No, it just means you don't like watching people suffer. Sorry, it's just so funny you have that same memory.
Yeah. Have I told you that before? Because that's an extreme. I tell that in my Mormon Stories interview. That was one of the first shelf items I ever had was at 16, totally Mormon. I made I Love Joseph Smith t-shirt when I was 16. So I was doing good on my love for Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Trust me, I was there. But there's a Joseph Smith movie, Prophet of the Restoration. I've always wanted to roast it. And it's playing in a big theater. You know, young men's groups will go and watch it. And after it ended, I remember I looked to my left and I looked to my right, and all my young women's group, everyone was sobbing, crying. And instead of saying to myself something like, do I not have a heart? No, I went with the rational one. I was like, I literally looked around and I was like, oh my God, that was propaganda. Why are you guys crying at that? That was because I remember they don't mention polygamy once.
No.
They don't mention polygamy once in the retelling of Joseph Smith's life and his martyrdom. And I'm like, I was 16. I was like, I know there is way more to the story. And I know polygamy was a hot topic, which I will get into.
Wow.
So the idea, we were talking about the church hiding things. They only hide things if they have a reason to spiritually manipulate you with a totally different propagandized story. And they hide things because they're ashamed of it. And they should be ashamed of it because on every corner, Joseph Smith has a wife that he is manipulating. And so, yeah, that was a time in which I was like, oh, I don't know why my church would do, still true, but I think I might have just been manipulated, still stayed Mormon for 15 more years. Gosh dang it. But yeah, Shalise, if you could tell me what you were taught in the church about why Joseph Smith was killed, if you put back on your best Mormon cap, what was the reason that, we'll skip why the saints were even persecuted in the first place. Why was he killed?
That's an obvious answer. They were persecuted because it's the one true church and Satan wanted to take it down. That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
And then he was put in jail because he's the one true prophet and people wanted to take him down, namely Satan. And he was killed for the same reason. That's the extent of what I remember of what I remember being taught about the chain of events that led to his death.
And I would just like any other people who are like cult survivors to also be like, hey, they told that about my cult leader who also was martyred. Like, it is interesting because in Mormonism, you were taught that Joseph Smith sealed his testimony with his blood, that he was going like a lamb to the slaughter is what he said about himself, that he's like Jesus. He's going like a lamb to the slaughter.
Right, like he was turning himself in.
And so if you already start off with the presupposition that you think this guy is a prophet, and then you hear the way that he was killed, that to a person who's already conditioned within a cult only further seals that, like, well, he died for what he believed in. He died for what he believed in, not knowing how complicated just the different political tensions of what Mormonism was at the time. So I want to explain that really quick. So I was saying how there are other types of religious sects at that time who were isolationist, and they didn't have a lot of problems because they just, I don't know, they're not as sex, power, money hungry for all the things Joseph Smith was. And that says a lot about the ways in which other religions can operate and the ways that Joseph Smith operated his by raising up a gigantic militia, raising up a gigantic voting block that if God is going to restore a one true church, he's got to know how intimidating it is for his prophet to have a militia march through town, how intimidating it is to have his prophet be arrested so many different times and escape the law in one town and move the saints to others to escape justice, so to speak, then use his political influence and power to as a voting block to influence elections in new cities that they move to. Does that make sense? Like, from every different angle, I just was completely obtuse, unaware of the actual political problems of what Joseph Smith, when he was not acting like a prophet, when he was acting like a mayor, when he's acting like a militia leader, when he's acting in all of the other hats that he was wearing, no pun intended. He's wearing a lot of different hats, and it's not just about he's a prophet. It's all the different things that I mentioned, right? And so you were talking about earlier how, yes, the Book of Mormon has these ideas in them that are supposed to be so concrete about the Native Americans are actually these ancient Israelites that are on the American continent, that this is the promised land, and that after they were slain and Joseph Smith needs to restore this gospel on this one true, like, American covenant land, he is there to reestablish this covenant with Elohim, with Jehovah, with God, to restore this one true continent. And so within that, I just want to point this out because this is really important to understanding different stuff with Tim Ballard and a lot of the American true crime stuff right now. Joseph Smith's racism and his power hungriness and his trying to run for president, it cannot be taken in like, you know, he just had some crazy idea that maybe I'll run for president. No, it was all part of a wider generalized like plan for him to be, he had his followers name him king of the world. Like he lost his marbles by the end, but the amount of power that Joseph Smith was trying to grasp at with this grand narrative, starting with the Native Americans, they fell away from God. I am the next to Jesus savior here to make this land a prosperous covenant land with God. Do you see what I'm saying? Like all of these different things had to link together. And those ideas are not just racist. They are these American exceptionalist ideas that are still totally alive and well in people like Tim Ballard and Rod Meldrum. And like we've talked about on your program before. And that's another holdover of Joseph Smith's is the extreme amount of like undeserved patriotism that so many Mormons like my family have today in an extremely dangerous right-wing type of religious extremism that was instituted and supported by Joseph Smith and all of the future prophets. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
I want to make you aware of a book I have completed, a summary of each book in the Bible. It's an ebook. It's free of charge. And what I've done, I've went through each book of the Bible, give a detailed summary, the key points, a basic outline of each book, the author if it's known, the date of the writing, all the information that you need at your fingertips on every book in the Bible. It's a great resource for your theological Christian library. Order your free copy today. My email address is pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. Let's get back into the program. Hello, I want to make you aware of an e-newsletter through your email that I send out every month. If you would like to subscribe to my email newsletter, please email me at pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com. I go over in detail a lot of these videos that I produce about these false teachers and false prophets and these wolves in sheep's clothing. I go into detail into the backstory, a lot of these information, a lot of these guys who they're connected with, more in depth on their false teaching, their lifestyle, and much more in this monthly newsletter. Again, if you would like to subscribe, email me, pastorvonhanshaw@gmail.com, and I will get you signed up. It's free of charge. I look forward to hearing from you today. Let's get back into the program.
So I wanted to explain that because cult leaders are going to cult. They're not just going to be happy with the amount of power that they have as a religious leader. He was after all kinds of narrative control in being the mayor of Nauvoo, having this thing called the Nauvoo Legion, this militia, and asserting so much control and amassing so much power that, of course, the different people in the state and the different cities they're going to move into are going to feel the pressure and the heat from this new religious sect moving in. And that is something that I never comprehended when I was Mormon. I just thought of him, like you said, as like, they killed him because he's the one true prophet, duh. But he's wearing a lot of different hats, right? So Joseph Smith would constantly use all kinds of very threatening language. This is where the violence comes in to get things done. That's how he has to do it. So referring to anyone opposing his plans, whether in the church or who are out of the church, who are dissenters of the church, as his adversaries, as the enemies, as working for Satan, that kind of language, right? That is, his followers are going to take that very seriously. So his prophecies about America's destruction if they do not follow him, and that this this gathering of Israel, this gathering of Zion on the American continent, his followers were taught to believe so strongly that America will only succeed with Joseph Smith as a leader and as a prophet and as a president, that anyone who was standing in his way, then that's not just the fall of the second coming not coming to fruition, that's the fall of America. And that is still everything to do with Mormonism today. That is still, again, Tim Ballard, that's my family. That so many people still believe in that message that Joseph Smith taught about the Book of Mormon, about the Native American people, about why this land, specifically the American continent, is so important, and that anything that needs to happen, any bloodshed, any casting down of the wicked, whether in the Book of Mormon itself is justified, all the wars in the Book of Mormon are justified, and any violence now can be justified. And that is why we see so much Mormon true crime. So I'm trying to bring it all together, okay?
Yeah, and I mean, he even enlisted Porter Rockwell, his personal hitman, to do his bidding, as far as we know, killing people for him.
Yeah. So at the time, Joseph Smith, I won't tell the entire story, but basically there are so much tension between the governor of Missouri, his name is Little Burn Boggs, and Joseph Smith and him, and an expulsion order ordered against the Mormons. But between Sidney Rigdon would have also very violent rhetoric, and there's a secret vigilante group called the Danites that started to emerge, which was enforcing even more strict Orthodox beliefs, targeting dissenters, all of these just extremely violent activities of looting and destroying non-Mormon settlements and anyone who was going against Mormonism. And so when I heard as a teenager about the extermination order from Lilburn Boggs, it's like, you Satan worshiping governor, how dare you? But there's just a lot of context about all kinds of, there's the Mormon War, there's a million different things I could get into about the violence that just one after the other was not squashed, but was encouraged from the top leadership of the church, from the number one talker to God guys, from the people who said that they speak on behalf of Jesus Christ. This person needs to have their throat slit, or this person needs to die. So because of not just the religious tensions was what Mormons want to focus on, but it's not just a spiritual warfare. It's fighting for the actual land of the United States. It's fighting for the soul of the covenant of the United States, which makes Mormonism very unique, I think, in a way that evangelical Christianity doesn't have, because Mormonism has this book of scripture that says, no, God set this land apart for us. It has another level of justification, right? So, for instance, so in 1842, there was, like you said, Porter Rockwell. They call it an unidentified gunman shot Little Burn Boggs, and he didn't die. He just was injured. Many people do believe that it was Joseph Smith's bodyguard, Porter Rockwell, which is so funny because I went dirt biking today, like I told you. And as we were driving home, I was like, just thinking about my podcast with Shalise tonight. And I was like, the last thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I get the information about Porter Rockwell right. As I was thinking that, my friend's like, okay, and then turn right on Porter Rockwell Boulevard or whatever. And I was like, am I hallucinating? And I was like, not only was I just thinking that's the last thing I need to, but I was like, that's Joseph Smith's, the assassin, Porter Rockwell, who's there's so many stories about just what a murderous guy. He said that he's never murdered. My favorite Porter Rockwell quote is, "I've never killed a man who didn't deserve it." Yikes. That's how you know you're in an A+ Christian denomination, right? But yeah, in Salt Lake, kind of down south, there's actually a street called Porter Rockwell Boulevard or whatever.
I'm not surprised.
Literally, he's known synonymous with murderer is what that means in Utah, but he has a street named after him. So welcome to the state of Utah. I don't know what else to say. So is there anything else that you wanted to add on that?
No, let's get back to the martyrdom.
Okay.
Why he was killed.
Okay. I cannot state enough how much Joseph's legal troubles, also just contributed to why he was killed. He had around 30 criminal charges. And there are sources that say that he was arrested at least 42 times across New York,
Whoa.
Ohio, Missouri, Illinois. And the thing about, like I said, two followers of Joseph Smith, each of these legal battles only served to solidify his image as a persecuted prophet who's unfairly targeted for doing his divine mission. Tim Ballard all day, man. Like, it's so in 1844, Joseph Smith was killed by a mob in Carthage, Illinois, while he was in jail awaiting a trial for basically inciting a riot and committing treason and destroying this printing press. And like I said, this death sealed the status as a martyr in the eyes of his followers, regardless of the fact that, you know, what led A plus B to we were never told he's destroying this printing press because the Nauvoo expositor was from dissenters of the church. It'd be like if William Law, who's like the second counselor of the church right now?
Oh, geez, I don't even know.
It'd be like if Dallin H. Oaks of the Mormon church right now decided to print a newspaper and say, I saw Russell M. Nelson doing all of this really immoral sex stuff, and he's getting all of like the hottest wives for himself, and he's calling people whores who don't want to marry him. It's some really serious stuff. It'd be like if Elder Oaks was dissenting from his position to say, enough of this, I've got to blow this wide open. And then Russell M. Nelson going, oh, really now? What if, while I'm the mayor and I say, no, you're not, and you want to print this one and only edition of it, burn it to the ground, fellas. The actions that led to this mob coming and Joseph Smith's legal troubles, it just paints this long picture to me of somebody who just does not have the fruits of a prophet. So just tying this all together, I am really upset at the ways in which my faith, when I was LDS, I'm not upset now. I mean, I'm over it. I've dealt with it. I've found an outlet. But generally speaking, for a lot of us, the ways in which our good-natured faith was used to put this control of a high demand religion over us, to constantly think that couldn't be Joseph Smith, there must be something that I'm misunderstanding. But I wanted to lay all of these things out in such a concrete way, because the thought-stopping cliches, the ways that apologists will often spin this, it's heartbreaking how many people are told that they are the problem and it's not Joseph Smith. Because like I said, he is the keystone. And if you allow these seeping thoughts of 25 different things that I just mentioned that, you know, point to this pattern of behavior, as members of the church, you know, we were told that faith is a virtue. And I just hate the ways that we were manipulated into suffocating down our own cognitive dissonance and our own like good natured ideas for trying to strive after community, and so many things that existential questions that we genuinely want answered that religious cult leaders can then take advantage of. And we are told that we're just misunderstanding and that it's an us problem. But even though I'm not Christian right now, I always like to point out the thing that we can kind of all agree on is apologists will say like, okay, well, did he bear good fruit? Like, you know what Jesus Christ said, by your fruits you shall know them. Well, look at ex-Mormons. Yes. Let's look at by your fruits they shall know them. That is, that's not supposed to be about followers or like dissenters from religion. That's supposed to be about the metrics of what qualifies or disqualifies somebody as a prophet. So for people who do believe in Jesus Christ and they do try to point to his words of like, how do you know if somebody is too sleazy to be a prophet or not? The fruits of Mormonism, they are uncomfortable for Mormons to look at, to talk about. And from polygamy to, Joseph Smith and his defrauding people with banks and the ways that he destroyed this printing press, the covenants that he established, members were instructed, you should be ashamed that you only have one wife to give me. Like language and verbiage, like give all of your time, talents, and resources to this person with no accountability. So that in a whole nutshell is why Mormons, they have such a hard time finishing videos like this. They have such a hard time confronting these ideas because there just is no good spin there's no way out of saying that the fruits of Mormonism from other cult leaders that we would all agree are cult leaders following Joseph Smith's example, there's no good fruit out of that. And then the lives that he's destroyed while he was alive are just not able in any way, shape, or form qualifying him by the standards of the God that he claims to represent.
Yeah.
So by every metric, he is not bearing good fruit and not any kind of man of any kind of God that I would worship. And if in Mormonism it is said that when you die and you go to meet Jesus, all the prophets have said that you have to pass through Joseph Smith first, that he needs to kind of sign your last final temperament. I don't know. They say he is standing there with Jesus Christ. And if that is what Mormons truly believe, any Mormon watching, if you truly believe that the prophets are in heaven and you have to go through Joseph Smith and say, I knew you were a prophet all along. Here I am in heaven with you. If that's Mormon heaven, then I think it's no different than hell. And you guys don't have anything over us. You can't threaten us with anything because that's your Mormon heaven with all of Joseph's mistakes. Sounds like a pretty miserable, hellish existence. I'll take rationality and some other type of tools to get through this life. It's not going to be that one, Joseph. No thanks, cult leader. And no one's so out. That's pretty much it.
I knew it. It's so funny. Jinx.
I was trying to think of any mic drop, but I was like, I think the entire last 2 hours have been a mic drop. I don't need anything else. I'm exhausted.
I think the one thing that I want to add, because everything you said was great. I didn't even need to chime in. I mean, you have your own channel. You do this without me. The one thing I want to add is it's really telling that his own first wife, Emma, supposed to be the love of his life, doesn't follow the church. She stays back and she creates her own branch, which is far more progressive, right? Mm-hmm. Church of Christ? Restored Church of Jesus Christ. RLDS. Right. I think of, but then they changed the name? Reorganized. Sorry, reorganized is the word. I think that's, for some reason I'm forgetting, but now it's called Community of Christ. Community of Christ. So I think it's really telling that she didn't want to stick with the next prophet who... Brigham Young went to Utah, settled Utah. That's a whole episode that we could do there on blood atonement and all the horrible things that Brigham did. It's just really interesting that even she was like, no thanks. I'm just going to create my own. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there wasn't really a good secession plan for after Joseph Smith died, because they didn't plan that he would die. They didn't plan that God wouldn't come rescue him. They didn't plan that Jesus Christ wasn't going to come. So she's like, Joseph Smith Jr., that's the next prophet. But yeah, there's all kinds of different break-off sects from that. And it just so happens the Brighamite branch, for a lot of the reasons in the video that we did about the handcart companies getting out west, by Brigham Young being such a maniac of how to get all these immigrants out west, no matter how many die, no matter how many freeze to death, no matter how many rations that we undergive them. It's the end of the podcast. I'm not making sense, but you know what I mean? All of those, what Joseph Smith's iron fist that he was ruling with is, in my opinion, that is why Mormonism by this branch and not the other ones. Because it could have gone a lot of different ways. Yeah. You could have known the RLDS, you could have known the FLDS. That could have been the biggest branch of Mormonism. But it just so happens that Joseph Smith, he started a legacy, and just who's going to pick up the baton from there? The most evil one? Leave your comments below. I don't know. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, we've done podcasts on many of them, like you said, the FLDS with Warren Jeffs, who we're speaking to, 2 more people, one of them who married Warren and one of them who was the son of Warren Jeffs. So we have a lot to dive into there, and we're going to be talking to Amanda Ray and Val again from the Order. We talked to people from the LeBaron group, the guy who continued blood sacrifice or the blood atonement. There is a lot of iffy stuff coming out of what Joseph Smith originally intended his church to be. So I'm glad the one that stuck around, that's the biggest, is the most diluted one, because wow, there's some scary stuff out there.
Again, going back to our original point at the beginning, the only reason it stuck around is because it had to get less fundamentalist over time.
Yeah.
But last point that I'll make, the reason, because so much Mormon true crime is going on right now, like I said, with Lori and Chad Daybell and Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke and Tim Ballard, which I'll be covering on my channel a lot. And I have a video with this guy, Ryan, which I'll be mentioning a lot throughout the next many years, because Ryan's amazing. He's like an ex-best friend of Tim Ballard. And he makes this fantastic point in my podcast about how Mormonism's proposition of prophets, seers, and revelators, and like this new restoration of people like, Captain Moroni tearing off their shirt in the Book of Mormon, like these badass dudes, that versus what the corporatized, kind of neutered version of the Mormon church today has created this vacuum where people are expecting something. They're in this religion because of the prophecies and the revelations and the personal witness. Yeah. And they think that, okay, well, if that's not what my church is actually doing right now, but that is what is supposed to be, maybe that's me. Maybe I'm the prophet. Maybe God's talking to me and I'm the one. Right. And that's why you see so many people springing forward saying their near-death experience or their connections to Tom Harrison and Visions of Glory has given them an inspiration that now they are supposed to be acting on behalf of, yes, picking up this baton that the modern church has let fall to the ground.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings it all together. It's a very dangerous doomsday religion that, again, made in America, born in the USA. So yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I hope that explains why when people say, what the freak is going on with Mormonism right now? Why are so many of its people on trial for murder and like sexual abuse? It's because of the last 2 hours of what I just said. So
yes.
By your fruits ye shall know them. By your fruits ye shall know them.
Thank you, Kara, for this fabulous presentation. We owe you everything. And guys, if you want to hear more about Mormon history, let us know, because I guess Kara had a lot more planned, but I had to cut it short because we don't do super long episodes here usually. So we do have some more stuff coming up with Kara. Don't worry. But if you're like, wow, Kara sounds so cool and so much fun, I want to hang out with her. Greece. They can go to Greece with you.
I mean, I think it's probably the best way. I'm going to start promoting it as like, I'll probably fix your life, because we're going to be friends and you have till the 28th of this month. So just a couple more days. I don't know, just a couple more days to sign up for this ultimate Greece adventure that I'm taking people on. So follow me on Nuanto on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram. Yes. My email is thenuanto@gmail.com. So if you have any questions about it, but we're going to be exploring Athens and Santorini for 7 days. And I'm going to try to get a yacht out of my own budget just so we can have an extra fun time going through all of the ruins. And most of the stuff is paid for. You have to pay for a couple things yourself, but it's a trip that is not just because I want to go do something fun and epic. It's also, I run a nonprofit now, and all of the funds raised by this are also going into my nonprofit and help support my podcast and all the community building stuff that I want to be doing in the future. So hope that you can find it in your heart to click any link that Shalise might leave down below and sign up. So there's a couple more days. I would love to have you.
Yeah. Sign up. I'm sure it's going to be
Costa Rica.
Amazing.
Boo. Just kidding.
Yeah, go to Greece.
It's not 200,000 subscribers, but it's something. So go there one day. I love Shalise with all of my heart, by the way. I literally am like, how do you do it? And I'm just, text me back on what I should title this, because you're good at that.
We're here for you, and we love you, and we want to have you on all the time. So
I just want to see your beautiful face all the time.
You're so
Shalise
sweet.
as a mom. Can we all just congratulate? Yay, Mama Shalise. Yay, Papa Jonathan. Look at her, working hard.
Kara.
Everyone, leave a like and a comment for the algorithm and subscribe. You put in the time and the content. Love you, girl.
Thank you.
Everyone loves you.
Thank you so much. Everyone make sure and go and subscribe to Kara at Nuanto. We'll put all of her links in the description. It'll be super easy to find. Go to Greece with her. You already shouted out my stuff, Patreon, all that stuff. You can get some merch, cultstoconsciousness.com under the merch tab.
Yes, merch.
Do you have a Linda Listen? Do you have like anything set? I mean, this whole thing was a sassy statement, but do you have anything that you want to add as a Linda Listen?
Linda, listen, if it walks like a cult leader, talks like a cult leader, it's probably the name brand cult leader, Mormonism, because you guys like quality. You guys didn't go to any other podcast to learn about Joseph Smith today. You went to Cults of Consciousness because you were on brand with the best decultifications that YouTube has to offer. So if it walks and talks like a cult leader, it's Joseph Smith. And if it's the best ex-culty podcast and it sounds like it, talks like it, then you're at Cults to Consciousness. I just wanted people to listen up. That things are obvious. It's not mystified. Best podcast and number one. We come from the best name brand cult. Sorry, no offense. Am I going to start beef with all of your listeners? You're like, no.
The name brand cult. I mean, I just call it the home team cult because it's where I grew up.
No offense, Scientology. That's Kroger brand. You guys are trying. Xenu. No. The cool outer space thing is Kolob. You guys are so close. You missed it. It has a different crunch. It has a different. It's like a store brand. Every other cult, Mormonism, Joseph Smith, he was like, I'm going to out cult every other cult leader who's ever culted. And he did. He really did. It's a legacy. That's my Linda Listen.
He was a cult leader. You're amazing. Thanks for coming on. We love you so much. Everyone go subscribe, do all the things, leave your comments. And if you like this video, we'll link 2 more down here below that you can check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.
As you well know, the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, is considered a cult by all conservative Bible scholars and Christians and myself. Now, I don't agree with everything that we just watched in this documentary, but it does prove my point that Joseph Smith was evil. He was not born again, and we need to pray for those in the Mormon cult, that they truly be saved and meet the true Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you for being with me on the Word of Truth broadcast.